Today I had a very educational conversation with Stephen Scarr, who is the co-founder of Info.com and eContext, which is the world's largest semantic text classification engine. They provide the taxonomy to bring real-time data structure to any data source. So this is, again, I knew nothing about this stuff until I spoke with Stephen, and he gave insights into artificial intelligence in general, the sort of the AGI and the narrow intelligence, the ANI. We spoke about virtual assistants and their future, but yet again, a lot of insight around eContext and how eContext can help companies structure their conversations and data in real time. Very powerful stuff, very insightful. I hope you enjoy this information as much as I did. Speaking with Stephen Scarr today. So Stephen is the co-founder of a company called Info.com, which is a meta search engine that basically pulls results from other search engines, giving you more comprehensive and relevant results. And his new company, which we're going to be talking about today, is eContext. And eContext is in fact the world's largest semantic text classification engine. So huge topics. I haven't got a clue how companies actually use taxonomy. So this is going to be a very interesting call for me. A lot that I'm going to be learning, and hopefully you will derive as much value as I will by speaking with Steve. Steve, welcome. Let's get straight into it. Talk to us about artificial intelligence.
The first thing I would say is that AI, artificial intelligence, is a sort of trending buzzword within the digital community at large. But it means that a lot of people are thinking that they should be running before they can even walk, or even understand what walking even is. Ultimately, if you come back to the stage of machine learning is very good at looking at anomalies in data. The huge challenge for the marketing industry is to establish how they can take those anomalies and bring them into real marketing insights, real business intelligence to provide value for their customers. And I also think that people are underestimating the importance of the data set that you are training against to provide these anomalies. Where I believe that we differentiate at eContext is that we have this capacity in real time to take third parties' unstructured data sets and create a structured knowledge base to which they can do their own machine learning or deep learning. There's also a big distinction from machine learning, whether you're able to do things, including AI, whether you can do things that is based on ANI or AGI. So we hear a lot about artificial narrow intelligence versus artificial general intelligence.
Right.
ANI are things where you're asking neural networks, deep learning, to do specific tasks. And some of these things they're doing very well. For example, machine translation work is using deep learning very effectively, as indeed is image recognition. But when it comes to AGI, this is really an area that the marketing world needs to embrace, because when you're taking a holistic view of your audience and their preferences and their interests, in order to clearly understand those interests, you need to have a general understanding across all verticals, across all categories. But that's it's very hard for AI to do that, because we're many miracles away from understanding in the correct context human conversations from an AI perspective. There are a number of things that they're doing to try and understand patterns and recognize these anomalies, but to really be effective, you have to have an understanding across all verticals. So we believe that the approach of blending curated taxonomy work with AI is the way forward, and probably for many years to come, despite what people tell you in Silicon Valley or in newspapers. So what does that mean from a perspective of a marketeer? Well, if you're able to take unstructured text and structure that across all verticals, then that general understanding gives you what's known as a general index, meaning that if you can take a corpus of data, in our case it may be social or search or web content, and then categorize it to our category tree, we have the unique advantage that by taking this knowledge set, we're able to understand what people talk about or search or share across all verticals. And taking that standard index, when we look at a client's data set and categorize that and look at those interests, then we're able to compare that data set against a general index to see where the key nuggets of business insights are.
Right. So for example, I'm going to use, let's take Centro as an example. So would they sort of API into your platform, and as information is coming through, it gives them context, or how would it be best used for a marketer? Like, let's say an average marketer.
You mean in an RTB environment?
Yes.
Well, I mean, let's talk about programmatic advertising. You've got the demise of the cookie. You've got millennials known as the swipe generation getting more frustrated by irrelevant messaging. So I believe firmly that we're moving back into an era of context, delivering the right message at the right time to that audience. But to understand the context of your user, you need to understand the text that user's reading. But beyond what you see currently, which is typically the IAB, or perhaps products where you have keyword contain, which is littered with false positives and irrelevant types of text that don't match your query. Context is very important. For example, in the context of search, when people are talking about roller coasters, typically they may be talking about amusement parks.
Right.
If someone's having a social conversation about roller coaster, it could be about Wall Street or even your love life.
Right.
So I believe that what's important from a programmatic perspective is the ability to understand the context of each page at a far more granular level than currently is available in the industry at large. So in our case, by having these 450,000 topics, that in itself is hugely important, but bringing it into a category tree is also important because it provides a common language for marketeers to optimize against. And if these nodes, otherwise known as categories, perform, then you can go less granular. So the analogy being, if you're driving traffic for Nike Air Jordan and that performs from a KPI perspective, you can then go into Nike basketball shoes. And if that performs, you can go into basketball shoes. And if even that performs, you can go into athletic footwear. What artificial intelligence, machine learning is also going to be particularly helpful is looking at these ontological relationships. So people who talk or search about Nike Air Jordan, what else are they talking or searching about? In the machine learning world, you've already got things like vectors, which they talk about as edges or word clouds, looking at these relationships of words. But ultimately, that's all it is. It's a bag of words or a collage. And unless you can bring that into a structured hierarchical tree, it's very difficult to understand what those relationships are about.
Right.
If your Uncle Ben's rice and you're wanting to look at all the vectors concerning rice, you'll get some lovely nuggets like basmati and steamed rice cookers. But there are other things in there like Rice University, Tim Rice, and Condoleezza Rice, which has no bearing to what they want to do from a content writing perspective or from advertising, creative, and targeting.
Right. And if I recall, I mean, those sort of categorizations are pretty deep, those categories that you have, right? So
yes, I mean, it's a category tree specifically to digital behavior. So, one of the other challenges with AI machine learning is that they're training, if it's on a supervised basis, training on documents that are in the public domain. So A, it's not proprietary, and B, typically public documents like archives of newspapers, or a popular one would have been Freebase before Google bought it, but you've got Wikipedia, for example. But Wikipedia doesn't necessarily speak to digital insights to the extent that they may be very good at history, but perhaps they're not very good at brands or other nuances that are trending. Things can happen very momentary in the digital world. It's important that you have the agility to adapt to creating new nodes where it's important, rather than relying upon a public corpus. So our digital knowledge base has been very important to build out these categories. So because we're a search engine through info.com and we license search data, we have a lot of interesting insights into people's intent going back to 2003.
You using, if I understand correctly then, so using the same sort of framework for bots, or it can be used for bots. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the key to this is that if you are, since we're talking about agencies and brands, ultimately, if you want to connect with these people, you need to understand how people interact with computers. It's of no interest how people, would read a history article in Wikipedia. You want to know, if you are on your smartphone, how do you engage to the outside world? How do you search? How do you interact through social media? How do you post content, whether that be articles or videos? So it's hugely important to understand these human-computer interactions. In fact, if you look at jobs from the big Silicon Valley companies, often it refers to in their descriptions work they are undertaking regarding computer-human interactions, because ultimately that's what it's about. It's about how to be part of that conversation, how people communicate with their smartphones. So having a knowledge base based on computer-human interactions and then being able to structure that into 450,000 categories provides an incredible advantage for when you're doing deep learning to understand the relationships between those topics and what sort of content falls within those topics. For example, we may have over 1 billion interactions, computer-human interactions, but if you're doing machine learning, there isn't enough data, even with 1 billion, to efficiently map those topics at a final node level of 450,000. So by collapsing our category tree into tier 5, where we have 30,000 categories,
right,
gives you lots of really rich, accurate data where the machine can start learning and looking at the relationship of the words, creating this automatic text classifier. So if we do see new data that we don't already have seen before, then the machine has a very good crack at mapping it. That's another challenge when it comes to training on supervised documents. If you have say an article about soil erosion and you ask the machine to learn about that article, of course that article talks about other things beyond just soil erosion. It talks about things that may be related to it, but not necessarily on their own are the same topic. So it may talk about fencing and irrigation and organic farming and poverty and rainfall. All these things are topics in themselves, where if you train a machine that's about soil erosion, then often the machine gets confused and maps things incorrectly, which is why it's really important to have a knowledge base of text that's extremely accurate to that given topic that you are trying to train against.
So if I understand correctly then, Stephen, so basically any kind of company that is involved in machine learning can leverage eContext.
Well, we have an API and we have terms of service, but yes, if somebody wants to take their client's data set and it's unstructured and they want to make sense of that data for all sorts of applications, business insights, machine learning, deep learning, then yes, using our technology, we're able to provide in real time the capacity to map this to topics and therefore give them a knowledge base to do their insights from.
Fantastic. And what would be the best way to contact you? Is it through the website? Is it through Shannon on LinkedIn? Or what is the best way?
Well, I think we have a website called sales at eContext.ai.
Okay, perfect. And then just sort of, I appreciate, I don't want to go over our time because I appreciate you're a busy guy. But can I just ask very quickly, from your perspective, I mean, you've been in the business for many years and you've obviously seen a lot, not only from an industry perspective, but also from a data perspective. What would you say from sort of through your business lens? Do you see sort of like the most exciting or the most prominent AI trends that it doesn't have to be marketers, but in general that you think we should be watching out for?
Well, I think the biggest movement, and again the biggest threat, will be with the virtual agent community. Typically we know that to be Siri, but recently you've got Google Home and Amazon Alexa and Amazon Echo, and Apple are due to bring out an updated version of that for home as well. I think people are completely underestimating the importance of these virtual agents. So if those brands aren't able to communicate through bots and understand the context of chat and how to deliver messaging and services and products against that, then they're going to have as much trouble in 3 years as the retailers are having it today against Walmart and Amazon.
That makes a lot of sense. And then, sorry, just sort of round things off. If somebody is looking at sort of leveraging AI in whatever capacity, so a company's looking at, they've never done it before, what kind of advice would you give them? So these are newbies, rookies, never done it before. What should they be aware of?
Well, I think you need to, first thing to do is define what the problem is. What is it you want to achieve?
Yeah.
Typically what people want to understand is what resonates with their audience and to understand, with their brand. So to understand your brand, you have to understand the people that like your brand, that resonate with your brand. So the first thing you should do is to collect as much data as possible on how people are interacting with your brand, whether that be through search or social reviews, and take that text, and because it's unstructured, use a technology like ourselves to structure it, segment that into digestible bits of data that you can look at anomalies and understand what makes that data set unique. And from that, you can then get a better understanding of the passions and interests that resonate with your brand. So you can then do targeted marketing and content writing against that.
That makes perfect sense. So in terms of implementing AI, first define what problem you're looking to solve, and then also collect all the data that you can with customer interaction so that you can segment and actually structure and use that data for improved marketing. Stephen, thank you very much for your time today. That was very informative. I mean, I've learned a lot about the use of taxonomy and sort of creating that context. So that was Stephen Scarr, CEO of eContext. Thank you very much, and look forward to speaking with you again in the future.